Everybody, welcome back. I asked you to ask me anything and you did not disappoint. I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of was expecting the worst. I scroll through like I always do. I always say, oh, I'm not going to look, but I always look. I can't not look. I can't help myself. But I did expect the worst. But no, you're too nice to me. And I appreciate it. But there's a lot of questions here that I noticed that I think are really important and helpful when it comes to other people that view the channel or other people who are just looking for answers when it comes to things in the subculture. And it's just one of those questions that you don't really think to ask, but is useful to know. So there's a lot of questions here that I'm really excited to answer. I didn't get to see all of them. I kind of stopped reading a couple of days ago, but we'll see. I'm excited. So I'm going to quickly adjust myself here before I forget, because I know some of you are a bit of a stickler for symmetry, and I can't say that I blame you. I can say that you're being nitpicky, but you know what? I'm kind of the same way myself. When I see something that's kind of off center or askew and it's not meant to be, I can't help but fixate on it. I have my tea. We went with green tea. I don't know what I'm thinking. Okay, so GP asks, I've read that goth metal is not goth. I was listening to Peter Steele. How do I classify the goth and typo negative? So here's the thing. I think technically the term is Gothic metal, and you're right, it's not goth. Gothic metal is a descriptor term for the type of metal it is, and that falls under the metal umbrella. And when it comes to typo negative is also metal. However, typo negative does have its place somewhat in the goth community, and the reason I say that is because it's kind of one of those adjacent bands, because there are a lot of goths that do listen to typo negative. So whereas it might be adjacent in a sense to where a lot of goths do listen to it, it doesn't fall under the umbrella because it's metal. Nicola123, oh shit, I did not mean to click that. Nicola123, hi, I literally just found your channel and I don't have a question, but I just want to say good work. Thank you, Nicola. Anna Flores, hey Angela, any advice as a goth alternative person trying to start off in the acting industry? I've done classes when I was younger and would like to go back. However, I know that the industry can be very nitpicky. You are correct. I'm not insecure of how I look. I just want to be part of something where I don't want to be part of something where I get the cold shoulder because I don't look like every other normie. Thank you. So unless you want to get cast as the alternative person, stick with your look. And I would be the last person to tell you to change. Always be yourself. You are a goth. You let that goth flag fly. However, when it comes to the acting industry, there's a kind of a point where something has to give, because you will absolutely get typecast if you fit into a certain mold. So I would recommend, say, toning down the look a little bit. There is some merit to standing out. Keep an edge about you. Always keep that edge so that you still are very much yourself. Speaking as a person who has been involved in the industry and looked goth and was told oftentimes to tone down the look, or even told that the black hair washed me out and made me look like a Morticia, and nobody wants to cast a Morticia in everything, it pissed me off because I'm like, well, why am I going to compromise who I am? And the reason is you're kind of asked to be a chameleon in a lot of ways. I never changed my hair. Oh no, that's a lie. I did change my hair. I changed my hair a couple years back when I did the film Purgatory Comics. Won an award for that too, but I changed my hair for that. And I immediately, I went right back. I couldn't help myself. I cut my hair off. I bleached the black out. It looked terrible, but I went right back to it. But don't compromise yourself too much, but you do want to tone it down if you want to get those roles. Unless, of course, you just want to stick with kind of the typecast alternative person. Otherwise, kind of tone it down a little bit. This is from Persephone. Another question, what do you think of all of those covers where you see a lot of representation of lesbianism and the over-sexualization of women? I'm referring to strictly goth and darkly inclined music or adjacents. I'm going to tell you, it annoys the crap out of me. I can't take it. I don't know why. If your music is so great, then why the hell do you need porn to sell it? Why? Why is it necessary? But I think that when bands do this, what they're doing is they're kind of putting out a message that this is how goth women are, and there are expectations that are kind of placed upon us, and then we're inevitably put in situations to where when we're approached and those expectations aren't met, usually met with hostility, when the inevitable rejection occurs. I mean, I think any sort of gratuitous kind of over-the-top sexualization and borderline pornography depicting goths just to sell a CD, I'm not about. If your music is really that good, you don't need it. And if you do, maybe you should probably practice a little bit more and become a better musician so you don't have to require on that sort of thing to sell a CD. George Ates asks, I like what you said about your program and picking your battles and issues that are important. Just like the red dragon and black dragon, the emotional always dictates over the physical. Be well, bunch of fun emojis. In life, I could date any kind of woman as long as she is not nervous about a guy who is a virgin. Could have done without that last part. But, I mean, hey, that's your truth, man, you live it. I just don't know where it correlates to the rest of this. Picking your battles. So it wasn't really a question, but it is true about picking your battles. I used to just basically jump on everything. You know, any kind of opposition that came my way, I always felt like I had to. It was my duty. I have to fight against it. If I see something that's incorrect, I see something that's wrong, you fight it. You fight against it. And the thing is, not everything has to be a battle. Not everything is your battle. And it took me a while to realize that, not until it started really taking a toll on my mental health, whereas I just stress. No one needs that. It's not good for the mind, and it's really not good for the body. So avoiding stress as much as possible. And George, I wish you all of the best in your virginity. I don't know if you're doing it on purpose or if you're waiting for what. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. If you're waiting for someone like the right person, I hope you find them. I'm sorry, I was just caught off guard with that. I don't know if I'm being offensive. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna drink tea now. Oh, I left the tea bag in there too long. You know when green tea does that kind of bitter thing? Ugh. Natia asks, do you sometimes miss wearing colorful non-Gothic outfits? And do you get stares in public? So the thing is, I never wore, before I went goth, I never wore colorful outfits as it is. I was always very much into neutral tones anyway. Earth tones, grays, always. That was kind of my thing. I was wearing, before I got involved in the goth subculture, I was wearing things like white. I was wearing things like beige, a lot of just neutral and earth tones. And then as the 90s kind of kicked in, it kind of switched into more grays. And then black, white, gray. So I've always had that kind of color palette. And it wasn't until I got involved in the goth subculture that I started experimenting more with color. I got more deep into the purples. I had a hot pink corset. So I miss that corset too. It was a really cool steel-boned underbust corset, and it was hot pink. But no, believe it or not, I explore more colors now as a goth. Daniela Juarez asks, hi Angela, I'm 16 and I've had trouble making other goth friends. I know that there are other goths where I go to school, but I've always been scared to talk to any of them. Any advice? Love you. It's always good if you know that they're goths, lure them over to you, like on your books or on your backpack in any other way. Graffiti it with your favorite bands, just to kind of let them know that you're one of them. Because if you are shy, the thing that always brings goths together is music. And back when I was younger and we would see another goth in public, we would immediately be like, hey, who are your favorite bands? And it wasn't a way to test the waters and see if they were a poser or not. We were just like, it was like the first thing that came to mind. It was the first thing we would ask. So we would kind of make it a habit to either wear band t-shirts or kind of graffiti anything that we had with us. Our bags, we would put band stickers on our boots because we wore 20 hole docks. When I was 14, I listened to a band called Bile, and they came out with this CD called Techno Whore, and they were giving out free stickers, and I put one on my boots, and my father flipped the hell out because he saw the word whore on my boots, and he made me take it off right away. So, but that's a great way to probably kind of draw people to you. Don't write whore on your stuff. That's not what I'm saying you do. Write your favorite bands, graffiti, like band stickers, band patches. You want people to see kind of what you're all about. And then when they see something familiar that you're into and they see that you're kind of part of the flock, 9 times out of 10, they're going to gravitate toward you and you're not going to have to do any of the work. Mackie. This has probably been asked in one form or another. What advice would you give to someone who doesn't really have access to an offline community and is unsure how to navigate the online community? There's also this creeping sense of embarrassment that my only true exposure and ability to participate in the community is through online means. Also, do you feel that one who doesn't dress in any of the goth fashion categories can still be truly participating in the subculture? I've seen some try to distinguish between those who just like the music and those who do everything from music to fashion, literature, interior design, etc. I don't know what to make of it. For them, it's either the entire package or nothing. I personally enjoy a real minimal, subtle look overall, and I feel like a lot of people would just try to tell me I don't look goth enough. I used to get that crap, you don't look goth enough, all the friggin' time when I first started my channel. And the interesting thing about that is when I first started my channel, I kind of hailed from an era of a much overlooked 90s period. And it was during that decade where the look was much more subtle. It was more subdued. It was more romantic. But the online goth community at the time when I started getting involved in YouTube, people weren't used to that. That was kind of a foreign idea because the only thing that they kind of depicted as goth was this template of what social media deemed goth was, and that was very extreme. So if you don't have access to an in-person community, it really depends on what country you're in, what state you're in. I would recommend really being a bit of a wallflower, looking online, going to places like Reddit, go on community groups on Facebook, and see what's going on. Maybe see what kind of concerts are going on. Concerts are a great thing because even if there are no clubs in your area, sometimes there are bands that come that will play not far from you and maybe venturing out to a goth club. But if you have any friends, even that aren't goth, just some normal friends that you know and you trust, assemble a crew, go together. It's always good to have that buffer with you. So when you have your friends with you, you feel a little bit more comfortable integrating. And I would recommend probably any of your favorite bands. You didn't really mention much with regards to music, but I would look more into music. So you mentioned things like, let me see, don't dress in the goth fashion. I have a lot of friends who are parents now, and I call them undercover goths because they look as normal can be, but suddenly like you get in their car and they queue up their playlist and you're like, whoa, Batcave called, they want your freaking playlist back. It's a music-based subculture. That's really what it's all about. It is a subculture that is built around music. Our roots are in music. That's where it all comes from. You look at the fashion, and the fashion itself, it's also inspired by the music. So it all starts from there. That's where its heart, its soul, its gut, that's where it is. So start with the music. Look for bands that are playing in your area. Start there. By way of going online, be a wallflower. If you're nervous about that, if you're nervous about integrating, just be a watcher. Look to see how people interact. And you'll start to see the certain people that may be problematic and the people who are accepting and answering the questions. And you'll learn to navigate from there. Constantine. Oh, you didn't ask a question, but hi, Constantine. Shayna, what kind of foundation and makeup do you wear? I haven't seen any makeup videos on your channel. I don't do them. I can't. I'm not great at doing makeup, but I'm also... I know that there are a lot of other channels where people are a lot more skilled, and that's not really where I want to go with my channel, but I'm happy to share products with you. I use Misha. It's M-I-S-H-A. Might be 2 S's in there. Try Misha with 2 S's, and if you can't find it, just 1 S, but it's a Korean brand, and I use a CC cream, which it has a really nice finish. I like things with a more natural finish. I don't like things that are too heavy. Antonio Garcia, question 1. Do you have an experience organizing goth parties and your favorite current goth bands? Do I have any experience organizing goth parties? I have a video on this channel about how to have a goth party, but it really depends on your age, because if you have, and where you're located too, because I know in Europe people refer to goth parties as or clubs. They refer to clubs as parties, and I didn't know that until I had friends in Germany who said, "Oh, we're going to this great goth party," and I thought it was a party at someone's house. Turned out it was a club, and I realized that they refer to clubs as parties. So, are you referring to clubs or are you referring to parties? But if you're talking about parties, I would recommend, if you live at home with your parents, got to get their permission. Make sure that they're home, because if they're not, a lot of trouble can be gotten into, and you will never be allowed to do a damn thing again. So get their permission, move some furniture out of the way, get a friend to DJ, queue up a good playlist, and start from there. But I would recommend looking for the Throwing a House Party video on my channel. Juanza Harrell, do you think that the subculture can and will survive the woke culture and or the saturation of e-girl OnlyFans thottery within the community? So as far as woke culture is concerned, I think that there's a balance to be had with really everything. When it comes to things like woke culture, it's important that we're tolerant of others and that we recognize our mistakes and we recognize where we're being intolerant and where we're unseeing people. It's important. Everybody wants to be seen. It's important that we see them for who they are and we see them for better or for worse. You don't want to be misogynist. You don't want to be racist. Obviously, like the obvious human decency things. I think when it comes to being woke, there's a difference between being mad just for the sake of being mad because you like being mad and offended, and there's also human decency. And I think that if we just focus on just being good people, being decent human beings and accepting people for who they are, that's, we have won in life. As far as the e-girl and the OnlyFans thottery within the community, now that's a big problem. Will we survive? Yeah. Goth has always survived. Goth has always persevered. But when it comes to things like that, it takes the whole community to actively fight against it. Because when it comes to things like that, an idea is put out there about goth girls, about what we are, who we are, what we do, and it's all basically false and it's based on fantasy. But when you have people outside the subculture that have no reference other than this, they don't know any different because this is their only reference point. But what that ends up doing is putting us in very uncomfortable situations when we're inevitably approached, and they feel very confident approaching us because of the way that we're depicted. So I think it's important that everybody within the community do their part and kind of speak out and set people straight when it comes to things like that, because there are people who are really, they are put in very dangerous and uncomfortable situations by way of this stuff. So Otto the Doll 2 asks, number 1, does goth have to be your main thing to be goth? And 2, how can you rekindle? There's a lot of different questions, so let me see. Let's see which one I'm going to answer. Okay. 1, does goth have to be your main thing to be goth? Yeah, it does. It does. So there are people who straddle so many different subcultures. They listen to so many different kinds of music. They listen to metal, they listen to goth, they listen to emo, they listen to hip hop. They listen to, like, they run the gamut of everything. But the thing is, when it comes to being part of the subculture, goth kind of does have to, if not be your main thing, be a huge part of who you are. Like, you can't listen to like 99% hip hop or 99% metal and have one Susie CD and say, well, I'm a goth. It's a little bit different. It's like owning a petticoat and saying, well, I'm Lolita. And you just own one petticoat. But that doesn't put you in an entire subculture. So it's really important to kind of differentiate what that means. So you don't have to only listen to goth music to be involved in the subculture, but it's kind of a thing that floats around quite a lot, and a lot of people think, well, I listen to all these different genres of music, so clearly I can't be a goth. That's not true. If you listen to goth, and you listen to mainly goth, but you're listening to all these different things, that's just called preference. All of us do that. I know a bunch of people who do listen to goth exclusively, but there's way, way, way more people that listen to different genres other than just goth. Do you have to listen to only goth? Absolutely not. Does it have to be your main thing? Yeah. I have hair in my mouth one second. Qui-Gon the Shy God. Where do I get chrome, chains, O-rings, etc., or jewelry, since I just thought of that too? Google it. You know what they're called. Just Google it. You'll find it. Go on Etsy. Even go on Amazon. If you're looking for the materials to put it together yourself, they got all the materials. Soapy Fart Bubble asks, Most of the time it seems that only romantic partners are the ones who are talked about as being toxic when the reality is it can also be friends. I can relate to needing to cut some of them off. I can't think of a question off the bat, so I might ask later. Well, I will look forward to seeing if I find you throughout the list. Marie, what do you think about Christmas, and do you want to adopt another dog or cat? I would love to adopt another dog. However, my dog does not get along with other animals at all. He is a one dog. And about Christmas, I'm on the fence. Truth be told, Christmas is a little bit depressing for me, and I'm glad it's over. That's not to insult anybody that does love Christmas. Clive H. Would love to hear more of your own experience on the scene when you were here in England and how it differed from New York. You've mentioned that a couple of times, but not really elaborated. I've yet to venture north to events, venues. The trains can definitely be a nightmare. But your trains are definitely more efficient than our trains, and you get tables on your trains. We don't get that. So when I clubbed in the UK, at least the ones that I went to, there seemed to be a lot more emphasis on electronic music. Are things changing now? I'm sure they are. I haven't been back in 10 years, but I'm going to be visiting soon. But I did notice that there's a lot more variation than we have. Random Goth. Not sure if this counts as something too personal or crossing boundaries, but what's your opinion about the overlap between the BDS community and the Goth subculture? Fashionably, there is an overlap. I'm aware that there's an overlap. Susie used to perform in BDSM clubs, Goth clubs hosting Goth BDSM nights, part of the aesthetic overlap in both communities, but sometimes Goths, especially women, are overly sexualized partially due to the connection, in my opinion, and hence the generalization, oh, they listen to goth rock, they must be kinky, I guess, which, again, no one has anything to do with one's sexual preference. No kink shaming. But I feel like there's a lot of stigma around goths because of that assumption. In a way, I think that it has a lot to do with the big stigma around the BDSM community, which is very negative. So when it comes to a lot of the BDSM community that are kind of advocating for things like safety and consent, they kind of do their best to do their due diligence to put that information out there about how important things like that are. As far as the overlap does tend to happen fashionably, mostly. But I will say that there were a lot of overlap in things in clubs. But the overlap, some of it used to make me a little bit uncomfortable because there were sometimes, I was underage going to these clubs. And then even getting a little bit older, I was approached a lot by people that were not necessarily part of the goth subculture, but there for fetish. And they would approach me asking if I wanted to play. And particularly when I'm a 15 or 16-year-old, I don't really understand what that means. I just know that it's sexual, and this person is thrice my age. It made me very uncomfortable. Now, should I have been in that environment? No, but the 90s was a hell of a time, so that's all I can really say about that. I think that the over-sexualization of goth girls is a bit of a pain in the ass. It's a touchy subject because when goth girls speak out about wanting to protect themselves and wanting to kind of separate those two worlds, we get accused of kink shaming. And it's not that we're kink shaming. The thing is, when you have people who are presenting in such a way and they are advertising, let's say, for example, their kinks publicly, for example, they have an OnlyFans or something like that, we get lumped in. We get grouped in even though we might not necessarily be part of that. And these are people who are outside both scenes. They're outside BDSM and they're also outside of goth. Because people that are inside BDSM, they're part of that, they are respectful for the most part. They understand consent, they understand boundaries, and they know how to play nicely. So they're not going to necessarily approach a goth and try to, be aggressive with them. It's people that are outside the goth subculture and don't know anything about BDSM other than the fact that they like the fact that you can be abusive with someone else. So they are not respectful in any way. They don't care about things like consent because they don't know about things like consent because they don't care about things like consent anyway, even if you tried to explain it to them. So I have had people come up to me and try to attach a dog leash to my collar one time. I was wearing a dog collar And it did actually come from a pet store, but it was very cute. Someone tried to attach a leash to it. It was a guy, and I barely knew him. I didn't even, I've seen him around. I did not know his name, but he felt that he was completely within his rights to invade my personal space and put a leash on me. Not okay. So I don't really know what the hell I'm getting at here. Let me try to like compose my thoughts into a cohesive kind of statement here. I think that people need to be a little bit more outspoken when it comes to things like that. People in the kink community that present as goth, that put this content out there, I think it's really important that they let it be known that there is a difference, understand the separation, and I know it's important that you need to sell, you know, your product, and you need to sell, like, say, your OnlyFans or whatever you're selling. It's also important that you distinguish the line between your job and consent, because when it comes to consent and it comes to boundaries, there's also a level of respect there, and we're not respected as a result, and we're treated very badly. And I've said this in a previous question, but we're put in uncomfortable and potentially dangerous and unsafe situations, and it doesn't just happen to goth girls who are adults. It happens to young girls too, and it's not okay. I understand the overlap. I can understand why the two have been put together. I get the overlap, but it worked when we were younger and the online community wasn't involved. But now, once the online community becomes involved, like once you add the internet to the equation, you take things like BDSM, you take things like goth, suddenly it's put in a fishbowl and everybody can see it. And what they do is they kind of pick and choose the things they want and the things that they like and the things that interest them. And it's usually something that's just physical or things that are just visual. And they don't take into account the nuances or the rules. They don't take into account the difference between BDSM and goth. They don't take into account respect, boundaries, consent. They take nothing into, they just know what they want, what they like, and they just want to come and physically take it. Which is why you see all of these disgusting videos on TikTok about these normie guys talking about choking goth girls, because apparently those two things go hand in hand. Why? Because they watched some OnlyFans content or some sort of fetish video where it depicted goth girls doing just that, you know, being choked. So moving on, a cringy fangirl asks, what are your thoughts on part-time goths or goths that are also in other subcultures? Like, for example, I'm a goth, but I'm also a huge fan of anime and K-pop. There's no such thing as a part-time goth. You're either a goth or you're not. There's nothing wrong with being a goth that has different interests. For example, you like K-pop. Nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of people who straddle different worlds but still are very much part of the goth community. Goth being a music-based subculture, once that is part of who you are, that's it. It doesn't leave you one day depending upon which way the wind is blowing. You don't just wake up on a Tuesday, say, okay, I'm not a goth today because I don't like it. And then a couple months later, okay, I'm a goth again. It doesn't really work that way. Goth is something very much deeper than that, much more involved. It's a community, it's music, and once that's part of you, that's really it. It's part of who you are, and it doesn't leave because you decide that K-pop is cooler that day. There is nothing wrong with straddling multiple things. Larkfly asks, I'd love to know how you are in general health, trying to start a family, what works, doesn't work so well in your relationship, and what's your view on long-lasting love. I'd also love to know how you take care of yourself. Like, do you work out, and how do you look so young? Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Okay, I'm going to try to answer as best as I can. Health-wise, it's been a roller coaster, and it's, you know, ironic I'm using that word because it is very applicable to my condition. I have an autoimmune disorder called Hashimoto's, and if you ask anybody who has it, it's like your health is a roller coaster. You have your ups and you have your downs. And the reason it's my thyroid is because with Hashimoto's, your body no longer recognizes your thyroid as being part of your body, and it wants to kill it. It produces antibodies specifically to attack your thyroid until it's dead. So what I have to do is I need to take thyroid medication because I now have an underactive thyroid, because when something sustains so much damage from being constantly under attack, it becomes underactive. So I have hypothyroidism as a result, so I have to take thyroid medication. Last year, I actually got very, very sick. I don't know if you noticed. I wasn't making a lot of videos and my appearance changed. If you look at my videos last year, starting in June is when I really got sick. I was thinking about making a video about it, but I'll kind of go through a little bit of it right now. So when it comes to having Hashimoto's, like I said, you have an underactive thyroid, so you have to combat that. And your body is constantly under attack with things like that. And your thyroid is involved in so many different processes. Like, it even has to do with your overall mood. It can affect everything from sleep. It can make you anxious, diet, everything, like everything. I decided that I wanted to try and put my autoimmune disorder into remission because I don't want one. Rightfully so. Who the hell wants one? So I did a lot of research, and I was researching different diets, different foods, different supplements, and things that I can do to rid myself of Hashimoto's. So I had a complete diet and lifestyle overhaul, complete. And this was starting in 2020. And I completely cut out gluten from my diet because gluten is one of the things when you have an autoimmune disorder that can trigger more attacks. And I cut out gluten. I implemented more probiotics into my diet. I make sure that I eat probiotics every single day. I take a whole slew of supplements that help with the thyroid and that are beneficial to people that have autoimmune disorders. I make sure that I exercise. So I was taking all of those things into account. At the time, I was taking a fairly high dose of Synthroid, 100 micrograms, which is what keeps my thyroid function level. But then suddenly I started feeling very sick, and my sleep started to really decline. Like, I would wake up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning with my heart bursting out of my chest with palpitations, and my heart was palpitating throughout the day. I was having vivid nightmares. I had to actually get a Fitbit because my heart would start racing out of nowhere. I would wake up and it would jump into cardio mode, and I would get clocked at. I mean, imagine waking up, like getting jolted out of sleep with a heart rate of 117. It was horrible. But I was having these vivid nightmares, jolted out of sleep that way, and periodically throughout the day, really fighting with keeping my heart rate down. This in turn made it really difficult to eat because when your heart rate is really going for it like that, and you kind of struggle with anxiety as it is, one thing triggers another, because when you're anxious in the first place, your heart rate goes up. But when your heart rate just goes up and you're not anxious, your brain kind of goes, hey, I know this dance. So your brain starts doing the thing as well, and now you're anxious and your heart's going off. So it got to the point where I couldn't really eat. I didn't know what was going on, and I had a lot of trouble with my endocrinologist. Anybody that has any sort of disorder where you have to rely on an endocrinologist, you know how hard it is to get an appointment, get a hold of them. Anything involving them, it's next to impossible. I don't want to make the story too long, but long story short, my endocrinologist was impossible to get in touch with, so I had to go to my regular doctor to test my thyroid because I had a feeling that something was wrong. I had a feeling that I was hyperthyroid because looking at all of the symptoms, it seemed to line up, but it didn't make sense. So they tested my thyroid, and sure enough, my levels had tanked. What that meant was my dose needed to come down because I was taking way too high of a dose. Needless to say, that dose had to be taken down several times because all of the changes that I've been implementing started to work. It started to decrease the attacks on my thyroid. Therefore, my thyroid wasn't as sluggish as it once was, so it didn't need such a high dose. So the medication that I was on had actually made me hyperthyroid, and I lost a lot of weight. I've learned from my eating disorder videos that I did explaining my past when it came to having ED. You don't mention numbers, but I will say that I ended up dropping quite a lot of weight, which had a big impact on my appearance because being a chubby-cheeked girl as it is, if you ever look at my old pictures when I was younger, I've always had like a very round face. No matter what weight you are, that face stays. I always look like a bobblehead. So for anybody wondering if gluten has any sort of bearing over Hashimoto's and recovery, speaking for myself, I could categorically state that for me, as much as I wish it didn't work, it works. because I miss pizza. I miss bread, like real pizza, real bread. I miss all that stuff, but it works. As for the family planning, still trying. As far as relationships are concerned, no friggin' complaints. My husband is awesome. Marty Lupin asks, do you find that non-goths seem to misunderstand the things that you enjoy? Not to be all edgy and nobody understands me, but I've noticed that my personality just gets boiled down to she's a goth who likes spooky things and Halloween when I'm so much more than that. Yeah, I think that there's expectations that come along with being goth, and those outside the subculture don't really quite get or understand that. They don't realize that, you know what, we can like farmers markets too. Our interests don't just boil down to only things that are dark and only things that are spooky. There are other parts to us as well. Something that I find very interesting is that we are more open in the sense to where, I guess you can say, normie people would love to do some of the things that we do, but they can be a little bit reserved in such a way, but they can't possibly foresee themselves doing anything that isn't cookie cutter or conformist because it's just not proper. And I think it really just boils down to the fact that we are far more open-minded in a lot of the things that we do because we don't really care what other people think in a lot of senses. It's also why we get branded people that suffer from mental illness far more than anyone else. And it's not because we're goth, it's because we're just more open to talk about those things. I think really that's what needs to be taken into consideration when people are that way towards you is they don't think that you're weird. They're just afraid to step outside their comfort zone. X said, how do you wash fishnet tops or DIY clothes in general? I think it could be better if you made a video about that too. I'm not making a video about doing some laundry. I'll just tell you right here. So it's really simple. You got your DIY, you got your fishnet stuff, right? Fill up your sink with some warm water and just wash them in there. Hand wash them, not hot water. Cold water, you're going to freeze your hands. Just room temperature water. Get a little bit of detergent in there, give it a good swish, rinse it out, let it air dry. That's it. There's really no science to it. Maria Pyers, are you looking forward to the new year? Also, what song is stuck in your ear right now? It's a hard question because I don't actually know if I'm looking forward to the new year. I've always been apprehensive about time because I'm always one of those people like, oh God, what's going to happen now? I'm looking forward to positive things. I have a lot of plans and I have a lot of things that I hope to achieve, but I don't know. I guess I'm one of those, you know what it is? I am very careful about say that I'm looking forward to because I have this kind of inbuilt fear, call it generational, of the malocchio. And growing up in an Italian family, when I got a nana who used to tell me that, you know, watch it, I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm a witch. You're afraid to do and say certain things, but particularly it's very important when it comes to things like the malocchio. You don't want to put the malarkeys on anything. And when by doing that, what you're doing is, like, when you brag about something, you say that you're looking forward to something, or you say that you love something, you got to be careful because when you brag about something, you are opening yourself up to have that taken away from you. Am I looking forward to the new year? I'm hopeful. That's all I will say. I'm hopeful. I think you asked something else. Let me just make sure. What song is stuck in my head right now? Butterfly on a Wheel. I've been singing that for the last 3 days. Sennies. I've cut band with my family after my dad's funeral. So to what I wonder, have you cut band with family and relatives for they have never accepted you to be goth? And have someone from your family or relatives ask if they could borrow your clothes? One of my sisters thought she could borrow my outfits when she was going to concerts. She said she wanted to melt in with the rest of the crowd when she would see Nightwish. Of course, I said no, because my clothes were not for masquerade. I can understand what you're saying. Your clothes are they're important to you. She was asking to borrow them because, you know, for any other reason, she thought they were beautiful and she might have been involved in the subculture. It's one thing, but she's wearing it as a costume. Therefore, you kind of took it as insult, and I can understand that. There were a lot of things that happened to me by way of my family, but one thing that never happened was that I was never criticized for being goth. And I was never given ultimatums or having my clothing taken away or anything like that. That was one thing that I was never talked down to for or criticized for or anything like that, or even not accepted for. But I have cut ties with people in my family for other reasons, because it's better for my mental health, because these people are much better outside my life than they are inside. And those are the reasons that I cut ties. And it can be done. It sucks in the beginning because when it comes to people like family, it's something you expect more to do with friends, but not family. But when it comes down to it, and you're thinking in terms of your mental health, your well-being, and just taking care of yourself, if a person in your life is not serving you positively, cut them loose. Lady Bard Rochelle Alucard. Hey Angela, I really want to try this YouTube thing out and start a channel. I just want to know what gothy things I could weave in as someone who's more of an introvert that doesn't go places. I think everybody should play to their strengths. We all have that one thing that we're good at, that one thing that we know about, that we happen to, it just comes so easy for us to talk about. And, you know, other people might ask us questions about it because it just happens to be something that we are good at or is a part of who we are. And you just kind of said it in one. You're an introvert. You are a goth who's an introvert and you don't really go out. And I think maybe you should touch on that, because I don't really see any channels of people really discussing things like that, because there are people who are more introverted. So maybe kind of coming from that place and speaking to others, because I have people asking questions who are like yourself. They're introverted. They don't really go out. They don't want to do things. And they could probably use a voice such as yourself, because that voice doesn't really exist that I can see on YouTube. And I think maybe you should explore that niche. I accidentally turned my camera on. Whoopsie. This one's a little bit of a tough one, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. But I'm going to read the question first. Let's make sure my camera's still on there. Yep. Hi, Angela. Gabriela Cantu asks, hi, Angela. I have kind of a personal question. Being someone who also has an abusive... I'm losing my voice. Being someone who also has an abusive, narcissistic, and neglectful mother of my own, how have you dealt with yours? Have you cut her off completely? Have you just distanced yourself? How have you dealt with that relationship? I'm asking you because I'm having a difficult time cutting mine out. If I'm silent for too long, she finds a way in by means of my son. It's extremely frustrating because she's a better grandma than she was a mother. I'll give her that. Do you think that I'm a selfish person for cutting her off from my son because of my own need for closure? No, I don't. I don't think that you are. Because if her being in your life is causing you harm in any way, it also affects your ability to be a parent, because you want to be the best mother that you can for your child. And when there's somebody around you that is a constant reminder of, say, a bad upbringing and is still a toxic figure in your life, that's going to affect your ability to be a parent. And I don't think that you're selfish for doing that, no. But there's a little bit more to it. I need to take a sip of my tea because for some reason my throat is killing me. So previously I did cut my mother off for those very reasons. I have recently gotten back in touch with my mother and we have a much better relationship now. The thing is, it is so confusing, is that she realizes the type of person that she was now. Like in her older age, she's at a stage in her life where she realizes the things that she's done. She doesn't remember a lot of it because unfortunately drugs were a big feature in that. She doesn't remember a lot of it, but she's not denying it anymore. She's accepting the fact that I have these experiences, I have these memories, they happened, they affected me on a grand scale, and she's no longer saying, well, that didn't happen, just because she doesn't remember it. She knows that her memory is not to be trusted because she spent the majority of her life being drug-addled. So that's helpful to know that she acknowledges that she was not the best mother and put me in a lot of dangerous situations and was very cruel to me for the majority of my life. So that messed me up a lot. What's also confusing is how different she is now. And it's not like she's trying to make up for lost time by going overtime with it, but she's trying to be a mother in the best way that she possibly can, but she doesn't really know how to be a mom because she never really knew how in the first place. And she also accepts that. But she's trying to be a part of my life, and she's not that toxic force that she once was. And it's confusing because for 98% of my existence, I mean, up until basically the age of 40, she was a toxic person who did horrible things to me, and actually who put me in dangerous situations, who said horrible things about me and to me, who had me cut off from my family, and it was really bad. I lost friends because I wasn't allowed in their home anymore because, you know, my mother would go in their house and steal their parents' prescription pills. It was rough, but she's not like that anymore. She understands now. But when you make it to the age of 40, and that's the only way that you've known your parent, and then suddenly they do a complete 180 and they're entirely different now, and they're really trying to do their very best to do right by you, it's confusing because that's a long time to spend seeing this person in one way and having that damage and having to navigate through life with this damage that, you know, resulted in trauma. Trauma is a hard thing to come back from. I still am in therapy from it. And it wasn't just from one parent, it was from two. So it's not just her. You know, it's my father as well. So, you know, I'm happy that I do have a good relationship with my mother now, but it's very confusing to me because, you know, having this good relationship with them and having them in my life trying to do like the right thing and do what's right by me and be a parent, well, be present, is difficult because I have these scars, I have these memories, I have this trauma, but here's the person that caused it and they're not that way anymore. My voice keeps cutting out. It's not because I'm upset, I promise, because I've been talking so much. So it's hard in the beginning, but once things reach a head, so when I initially cut off my mother, I want to say this was back in 2016, maybe 2015, when I initially cut her off. The final straw for me was I ended up in the hospital because I had an ovarian cyst rupture, which I don't know if any of you have ever had that happen. It hurts. It hurts a lot. I coughed real hard, and then the next thing I knew, I was on the floor, and I was clenching my fists so tight that I made my palms bleed from digging my nails in. I thought my appendix ruptured, and I was taken to the hospital, and they performed all these tests, and eventually they did what's called a transvaginal ultrasound, which is where they treat you like a human USB port, and they saw that I had ovarian cyst, and around one ovary there was a lot of fluid, and they were able to confirm that one had ruptured. And I called my mother from the hospital. This is before I was able to, I knew what was going on, and I said something happened, I'm in a lot of pain. You know, they have me on an IV, they're giving me, they're trying to manage my pain, I'm freaked out, I'm scared. And she proceeded to say, oh, you think that's bad? I had a horrible day at work. I had to lift this, a 450-pound person, which she, you know, she's a CNA. And she's like, and now my back is killing me. And I just hung up on her because it was really at that moment that I realized that she was never really there for me. I was in a lot of horrifying situations. And every time I really needed a mother, I would always reach out to have a mother. But I never got that. And I always came away feeling lonelier than I was before, but that didn't mean that I ever stopped trying. But it was at that moment when that happened where everything just suddenly clicked. I'm in a hospital bed. I'm hooked up to an IV. Like, I don't know what's happening, and it just feels like something exploded inside my body. I'm in all this pain, and I'm reaching out for a parent. I'm reaching out to my mom and telling her what happened. Hey, I'm in the hospital. And all she can do is complain to me about lifting a heavy person and, you know, her back being in pain. And I just hung up on her, and I didn't talk to her since. I'm like, that's it. And I resigned myself to the fact that I'm like, okay, I don't have a mom. I had to accept the fact that I need to stop expecting her to be the mother that I want her to be, because she's never going to be that. I either need to accept it and try to have a relationship with her that way, or if I'm incapable of doing that, then cut ties. And that's what I chose to do. I cut ties. And in the last few years, we moved to a different state. And like I said, she's in an entirely different mindset now, and she's a different person now. So it is hard to wrap your head around, because you have these memories and these scars, and the person that caused them is very much different. But it's a work in progress. I kind of waffled a little bit there, but no, I don't think you're wrong, and I don't think you're selfish. I think, if anything, you're doing right by your son, because you're doing what you can to be the best mother possible. And I think that something like that is very commendable. And who knows, in a few years' time, perhaps your mother can realize the error of her ways and hopefully try to mend things with you and make things a little better. Moving on. Pencil sharpener. It's funny your name is Pencil Sharpener given your question. Do you think that facial extractions are good for the skin? Done professionally, of course. Yes. In a lot of cases, extractions are really important, because there's, for example, if you're suffering from cystic acne, in my field, I get a lot of clients who were sent via their dermatologist, and they're getting treated for acne, but they'll come to me with active breakouts. So where they were just prescribed medication, say Accutane or something like that, or, some strong antibiotic, they're sent to me so that I can extract them and get all of that gunk out of their face so they can kind of start clean slate. But definitely done professionally. But I would steer clear from anybody that uses those tools or any kind of lancing devices, because those are things that you really want used in more of a professional setting. Esthetician, I would probably trust somebody more in the medical field with regards to using any kind of metal tools or anything that can actually pierce the skin. Star asks, has there been any time that you felt like leaving the scene but decided not to? What's the story? Also, how can younger goths enter their local scene? A lot of stuff is 21 plus. As for the young goths, have a house party. Always make sure the parents are involved. Make sure that they're on board. I have a video on my channel on how to do that. And have there been any times I felt like leaving the scene? Yeah. In 2005, the goth scene really started to tank here, because for whatever reason, people in the house and kind of rave scenes started taking an interest in the goth clubs and started infiltrating to a way that it was just so extreme that the club owners and DJs started catering to them and playing less and less and less goth and more electronic music, and really pushed the goths out. And it became very few and far between that you really got to hear goth music. It started to die at that point, and I did kind of cut out, and I ended up leaving and moving to England for a bit. Blues Naranja asked, where did you get that dragon necklace that you wear sometimes? It's great quality. I love it. Please suggest some good Gothic jewelry shops. Alchemy Gothic is great. They have beautiful things, and that is where I got the dragon. The dragon doesn't belong to me. It was a gift for my husband, and I love it so much that I borrow it sometimes. Danger Floof asked, I wanted to ask two things. I'm only going to answer one because there's so many here, but what do you think about the fact that many of the early goth bands, such as Bauhaus, Susie, The Cure, Christian Death, and especially Sisters of Mercy, don't want to be labeled as goth? Honestly, as suck as this is to say, I really don't think that it's up to the band as to where their music is classified. You could decide that I want to start, say, a goth band, but it comes out like polka. Guess what? Polka fans are going to be listening to you, and that's what your music is going to be classified as. So it doesn't really matter what elements you personally want to bring to the table. It matters what comes out. And when it comes to all of these bands, now bar for a few, like such as The Cure and Susie and the Banshees, who really have had some periods and albums, like entire albums that are just straight pop. Some of their music is intrinsic to the subculture because some of their music is in fact goth. But it's really up to the goth subculture and a listening ear to determine what is and isn't goth. And as far as Andrew Eldritch is concerned, he can kick and scream all he wants, but goths are his bread and butter, so he needs to shut up. His music is goth. Emma Cara, when you were younger, did you believe in the supernatural, like ghosts, demons, witches, fairies, and did you believe in God? Yes, I believed in all of those things when I was younger. I saw a lot of weird crap when I was younger, like a lot of weird things. And even to this day, I don't know if these are things that I actually saw or if that's a side effect of the growing brain. You know, your brain kind of coming into itself and neural pathways being built and whatnot. And you know, this is just sort of a side effect and hallucinations that happen by way. But I saw a lot of crazy stuff. I have memories of this when I was a kid. So I don't quite know what that is, but I did believe in it. Favorite Gary Numan song or memory? I can tell you my favorite Gary Numan memory. So the song Cars, everyone knows that song, right? They used to play it all the time at one of my favorite clubs, Subversion, when I was 15 years old. And I remember the second that song would get played, everybody would go to the dance floor and we would bust out our best 80s dance moves to it. I used to love the synths that came along with it. I still do. GRP Graphics asks, this is skincare related. Any tips on getting rid of broken capillaries naturally without laser treatment? Oh, unfortunately, that's really the only way to go about it is laser. Lady Lala, I enjoy listening to Gothic music and researched about the goth scene for quite a while now, and I identify as goth, but dress quite normal, all black clothes and some broke AF. The thing is, I know that to be goth, you have to listen to the music, but sometimes I don't feel like it. From late summer to spring, I love to listen to goth, but in the summertime, I prefer other genres, so am I a poser? I've never heard of people listening to goth seasonally. My question would be, do you still love goth during those periods? Sorry, my screen went off here. I wouldn't say that you're a poser or anything like that, but it's quite an odd question because I've never heard anyone who listens to goth seasonally. And I mean, my question to you, I suppose, would be, in the summertime that you prefer other, do you hate goth? Because if you still love it, it's still an intrinsic part of you. I would say, you know, you do you. But I've never heard of that before. Somebody who seasonally listens to goth. Decado Prime asks, do you think that being goth is more mainstream and acceptable nowadays compared to back in the 90s and 2000s? Yeah. Back in the day, particularly like the further back you go, you were beat up for it. You were attacked, beat up. In the 80s, you had satanic panic. You had people that were jailed. You had people who were really violently attacked. And still that carried over into the 90s until the goths kind of became a freak show and ended up on talk shows and things like that. But nowadays, I think it's much more acceptable, which is a good thing because you don't have near as many people getting hurt because of it. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of my Q&A. Since the video exceeded 2 hours, I thought I'd break into 2 parts. Many more answers to your questions to come, and I will see you in part 2. Until next time, bye.